Hey guys, tonight we're paddling out under a velvet black sky, the moon hanging like a silver coin over a wide, endless ocean. There's no GPS, no compass, just you, a carved wooden canoe, and an almost uncomfortable amount of open water stretching out in every direction. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies your next island, a speck of green in a universe of blue, and if you miss it, well, let's just say your snack stash isn't going to get you very far. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough to post your location and local time in the comments, there's something oddly soothing about seeing where everyone else is drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit low in a double-hulled canoe, the hulls lashed together with coconut fiber ropes, creaking gently as the swell rocks you. The salt in the air makes your lips sting a little, and your fingers rest on the warm wood, worn smooth by generations of wayfinders before you. This isn't just a boat, it's a floating memory passed down by hands that knew the sea better than dry land. Polynesian navigators known as taumanu or wayfinders were masters of reading the ocean like a scroll. They didn't guess their way across the Pacific, they traveled with intention, guided by a framework of mental maps and environmental signs. And while historians still argue whether these techniques were rooted in pure science or sacred intuition, one thing's certain, these people made cross-continental voyages long before most Europeans dared to peek beyond the horizon. Tonight, you're stepping into their world. You watch as the water turns dark indigo, reflecting the star-pinned dome above. Your navigator seated at the stern murmurs to himself not spells, but calculations. He's checking the alignment of Sirius with the horizon, noting where the Southern Cross tilts, making sure the canoe still slices through the sea on the correct axis. There are no charts, just memory, just sky. You start to notice things. The stars move across the sky not just in circles but in familiar paths. You learn that certain stars always rise and set in the same places, like lights flicking on and off along a cosmic highway. These star paths help your canoe stay aligned with a destination you can't yet see. Even now, Polynesian star charts survive not on parchment, but in song stories, and the minds of those trained to recite dozens of celestial bearings by heart. A fringe detail. Some navigators practice lying on their backs in the canoe just like you are now, to train their bodies to sense subtle shifts in direction through the position of the stars and the motion of waves beneath them. You try it and feel the canoe rocking beneath your shoulder blades like a baby's cradle. It's weirdly comforting, but also deep breath that reminds you that there's absolutely nothing keeping you from drifting off into oblivion if you mess this up. Polynesian navigation is often described as holistic, which is a gentle way of saying you need to notice everything at once. Not just the stars, the color of the ocean, the smell of rain on the wind, the squawk of a distant bird. It's the sensory equivalent of trying to pat your head, rub your stomach, and recite a shopping list backward, all while steering a boat. You glance down and realize the navigator has carved notches into the wooden frame, each one representing a key point in the voyage, almost like a to-do list from a time before ink. And yes, we're talking about voyages that could last weeks. The Pacific isn't a friendly little pond. It's the biggest thing on Earth. Polynesians didn't just cross it, they colonized its scattered dots with startling precision. Here's a fun bit. Historians love to toss around if you overlaid a map of ancient Polynesian routes. Over Europe, these voyages would stretch from Portugal to Pakistan, and they did it without compasses, clocks, or caffeine. As night thickens, you hear nothing but the gentle slap of waves and the occasional creak of the lashings. You imagine what it must have felt like to be the first to attempt this, to paddle away from a familiar coastline with nothing but sky and faith. Your navigator eyes half closed hums softly. It's not a tune you recognize, but it syncs with the motion of the boat and the rhythm of the night. You let it lull you, but just as your eyelids begin to flutter, you remember something unnerving. If you fall asleep on a voyage like this, there's a solid chance you'll wake up on an entirely wrong island, or not wake up at all. Navigators took shifts watching the sky in overlapping rotations, ensuring that no one missed the moment when a star dipped below the horizon or a cloud began to build in a suspiciously symmetrical shape. You shift slightly, trying not to rock the canoe. The stars shimmer overhead, your first taste of the ancient GPS, and here's where your journey truly begins. Because soon you'll be using more than just the stars to find your way. You blink against the salt wind eyes, adjusting to the faintest shimmer on the horizon. It's not land, not yet. It's something softer, subtler, the first of many signs in a vast, moving puzzle. A shape in the clouds, perhaps. One that doesn't belong. You didn't notice it before, but now you see it, a low, puffy formation that hovers in place, while the rest of the sky dances past. Your navigator stares at it like it owes him money. And then he nods, satisfied. That cloud, he tells you, sits above land. Not always visible land, but rising air, different temperatures, and moisture levels create stationary cloud banks over islands. The cloud doesn't scream, hey land here, it whispers, and only if you're paying attention. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators truly relied on cloud types as a major system, or if it's one of many maybe tools layered on top of a core star navigation model. But standing in this canoe, squinting at that suspicious puff, you realize you'd grab at any clue the sky offered. Even if it came in the form of an oddly persistent cumulus. You learn to look for the lapa, those faint light flashes in the water said to point toward land. They're real but maddeningly elusive, like trying to catch the glint of a fish underwater with your peripheral vision. Some researchers claim they're bioelectric discharges. Others suggest optical illusions caused by underwater reflections. Either way, you'd better believe wayfinders use them when they could. You become obsessed with noticing. The way the wind shifts without warning. The scent of distant vegetation that rides the air like a ghost of trees. At some point, your navigator pulls out a small bundle, feathers, shells. Bits of coconut husk. You expect some kind of ceremony. But no, it's just a wind marker. Functional magic. He sets it on the prow, watches it twitch, nods again. You're still on course. Apparently, cloud patterns aren't just land indicators, they're mood indicators. Thick, low formations might mean squalls. High streaks often precede changes in wind. You start to read the sky the way some people read body language. Narrow, pouting clouds. Probably trouble. Broad, stretched ones, time to relax. Relatively speaking, you laugh quietly, realizing your modern brain is desperate for a control panel. A button, an app, anything. But here, everything is analog, organic. The whole world is one enormous, ever-shifting dashboard, and you're just starting to learn what the buttons do. A fringe note from early European encounters, missionaries often reported Polynesian navigators pointing to empty sky and saying there when asked where the next island was. When pressed for how they knew, the answers ranged from, "I just do," to "the sea told me." Not exactly comforting, but weirdly honest. You're told to rest for a while. Not sleep, just lie still. Feel the wind. Listen to the waves slapping the hull. You close your eyes and try to focus only on your skin and ears. This is how the best navigators learned, by tuning out the noise and letting the sea do the talking. Some could supposedly detect subtle shifts in wave direction, even during a cloudy, starless night, just from the way their boat rocked. And while historians still argue whether this was real sensory mastery or romantic mythologizing, you can't help but notice the difference already. You start to feel the ocean as texture. Some waves are short and tight, others long and rolling. You imagine each one a sentence spoken in the language of currents. Your navigator tells you that birds come next. You raise an eyebrow. He points to the sky, and there, barely visible, a speck flutters just above the horizon line. The bird doesn't flap randomly. It loops, dips, and glides in a predictable circuit. You're told this is a naughty turn one of several seabirds that don't fly too far from land. They're like feathered boomerangs, venturing out to fish and returning to the same tree or cliff day after day. Watch them long enough and they'll draw a dotted line to home. It's not foolproof. Some birds travel further, others don't follow a perfect path. But if you see 3 or 4 of them spiraling in the same direction at dusk, that's your freeway sign. You remember reading somewhere that some Polynesian voyagers carried birds in cages, not as food, but as scouts. Let one go and watch if it circles and returns land is behind you. If it shoots forward and vanishes, you might want to paddle faster. The sky glows now with a pearly early morning sheen. Your navigator squints into the light. The clouds above that spot haven't moved. In fact, they're starting to look a little greener at the base. You might be close. Your body aches. The sea has no respect for lumbar support, but your brain buzzes with something between awe and disbelief. You've crossed who knows how many miles using nothing more than stars, sky clouds, birds, and the creaks of a canoe. You wonder how many times people got it wrong, how often they missed by an island or two, or paddled until their ribs stuck out like oars. But your navigator just smiles. Not a wide grin, a knowing one. The kind that says land's not far now. You take a deep breath. The air has changed. It smells warm, green, like damp bark and sun-baked leaves. You look up and the cloud is still there, thick and patient. The bird is circling tighter. Your journey is beginning to make sense. You don't see it at first. Just more horizon, more cloud puffs that might be wishful thinking. Your navigator hasn't said a word, but he's watching the birds more intently now. A second one joins the first sleeker dartier, gliding in the same direction. A third swoops past the canoe wings, slicing the air like a blade. This isn't random. It's rush hour in the sky. And suddenly your navigator taps your arm. No words, just a pointed chin. You squint. Something's different. Not cloud, not bird. A smudge on the edge of the world. You blink again, and it's gone, then back, then gone. You try to convince yourself it's just a shadow, maybe some clever trick of light, but no. The smudge gets larger, darker, more solid. Your brain, programmed by too many city skylines and mountain silhouettes, takes longer to identify it. It's land. The island rises slowly like a whale surfacing. Trees fuzz the top dark green against sky. There's no white sand beach visible yet, just the chunky outline of volcanic rock, and a darker blur below reef probably. Historians still argue whether Polynesians truly found every island by deliberate exploration, or if they also stumbled upon a few retraced routes and then mythologized the process. But in this moment, with the island growing clearer, and the navigator still calm as a coconut, it's hard not to believe they really knew what they were doing. You expected cheers, high fives, someone breaking into a ukulele solo. But the canoe crew is quiet, not solemn, just normal. Like this is Tuesday. This is how it's supposed to work. They start making small adjustments. The sail shifts slightly. Paddles dip gently into the water, steering you with the grace of someone backing a car into a tight parking spot with one hand, eyes closed. Then comes a moment that feels like magic. One of the birds dives hard like a javelin and disappears beneath the waves. Seconds later, it bursts out again, silver fish flashing in its beak. The navigator watches it for a beat, then changes course by a degree or two. You can't help but ask why. He explains the bird's dive zone suggests shallow reef, meaning land isn't just near, it's reachable. But you don't want to approach too directly. That's how you wreck your canoe on sharp coral teeth. Instead, you angle for the safer side, the one with deeper access and fewer surprises. It's part instinct, part memory, part science. And possibly part magic if you're into that sort of thing. You learn later that some navigators memorized dozens of reef profiles. They could recognize islands by the shape of their underwater footprints, how the swell changed around each coast. Some could supposedly identify an island by how the ocean sounded slapping against the hull. One fringe story from the Marquesas tells of a blind navigator who could tell which island he was approaching, just by the scent on the breeze. Cinnamon flowers, volcanic dust. Real or not, you kind of want to believe it. Your canoe edges closer. You see more detail now. The trees are pandanus and coconut tall and wiry. The rocks are sharp, but there's a gap, a channel between them where calmer water sits like glass. That's your entrance. The navigator whistles, low and short, a kind of brace yourself warning. The crew shifts paddles ready. You expect a crash, a wave, something dramatic, but instead you slip into the lagoon with a sigh. The water goes still. Birds settle on nearby rocks. You exhale and realize you've been holding your breath for the last mile. Then silence. Not absolute silence, but that thick, padded quiet that happens when there's no wind. No engines, just the hum of your own ears. You've arrived. But here's the thing, the voyage isn't over. Not really. Because every navigator knows that getting to land is only half the story. The true test is remembering the way back. And that knowledge lives not on a map, but in your head. The Polynesians didn't use maps in the way you think of them. No scrolls, no parchment. Instead, they carried the voyage inside themselves, a memorized rhythm of stars, swells, clouds, and clues. This is where you learn about Itak. Itak isn't a direction, it's a system. Imagine picking a reference point, a star, a cloud, a distant island, and measuring your progress not by how far you've gone, but by how that reference point moves across your field of vision. It's a form of relative navigation, like driving cross-country using landmarks instead of road signs. You try it on the way in. Pick a cloud. Watch how it shifts as your canoe drifts forward. Then try to remember how far it traveled across your sightline by the time you reach the lagoon. That becomes a mental unit, a remembered stretch of sea. Repeat that process, stitch the segments together, and you've got yourself a mental chart. Historians still debate whether Atok was universally practiced or more localized. Some suggest it only worked in island chains where reference points were easier to spot. But as a conceptual model, it's beautiful and weirdly comforting. Like knitting your own map out of sky thread and water needles. Back on land, the crew relaxes. Someone breaks open a coconut with an expertise that suggests he's cracked about 400 of these. You sit on the sand legs, sore brain spinning. Your navigator walks past you and taps your shoulder once. He doesn't smile, doesn't lecture. Just says one thing. Now do it in reverse. You'd assumed the hard part was over. You'd made landfall. You hadn't been flung overboard by rogue waves or eaten by a shark the size of a small truck. You'd navigated across open ocean using nothing but clouds, birds, a few stars, and a man who seems to have a GPS chip implanted in his skull. But then comes that one-liner. Now do it in reverse. You laugh nervously. He doesn't. Because for a real Polynesian navigator, returning home wasn't just a bonus feature. It was the test. Anyone could paddle in one direction and hope for the best, but bringing your crew back safely, that meant you were worth remembering. And here's where things get delightfully weird. You're told the journey home will follow a different path, not physically, but mentally. Because the ocean has changed. The sky has changed. And so the map in your head must flex and breathe and twist to keep up. The first thing you learn is that the return voyage often starts before the outward one even ends. Experienced navigators would begin memorizing their departure island's horizon shape as soon as they left it. Not the whole thing, mind you, just the angle of the tallest peaks, the way the clouds pooled over certain ridges, even the direction certain birds flew when you crossed the reef. This mental snapshot became your compass rose. Historians still argue whether this practice originated from necessity or ceremony, but no one disputes how effective it was. As you prepare to leave the new island, you're told to sit still. Just observe. This isn't a rushed departure. The navigator watches the wind comb through the palm trees. He notes how the clouds gather along the western spine. Someone tosses a handful of sand into the air and stares at the way it drifts. It's all part of feeling the rhythm of the new place before you leave it behind. You're not just watching the weather, you're syncing with it. You set off under a moonless sky. The stars wheel overhead like an enormous glittering clock. You squint up and try to find a familiar pattern, but the constellations look slightly off. The navigator points toward one cluster and whispers, "That one moves with us." You nod like you understand. You don't. Turns out Polynesian navigators used entire star compasses, imaginary rings drawn around the canoe's horizon. Each star would rise at a specific point, reach its zenith, and set at a predictable location. If you knew the sequence, you could steer by starlight alone, even when clouds rolled in and visibility dipped. What's more impressive is how layered this system was. Some navigators memorized over 100 stars and their rising points not just for one season, but multiple. Because, as you know or now know, the night sky doesn't stay the same. It wobbles across the year like a sleepy carousel. And yes, it gets stranger. There's a tradition found in some parts of Micronesia of building stick charts. These were lattices made from thin palm ribs tied together to represent current swells and island positions. They weren't used on board too fragile, but were memorization tools. Navigators would study the chart, then leave it behind and carry the whole map in their mind. Modern scholars still debate how precisely these charts were used. Some say they show wave refraction patterns, others claim they're symbolic. Either way, they represent something astonishing: an entire ocean turned into a kind of tactile mnemonic device. And you're now in the middle of this sea trying to absorb any of it. You've started naming stars on your own because remembering Betelgeuse is harder than calling it Big Toasty Guy. One of your fellow paddlers overhears this and nearly chokes on laughter. But when the navigator repeats your nickname later, nodding solemnly, you realize you may have accidentally contributed to oral history. Your canoe carves across the dark. The water glows with bioluminescent sparkles, tiny plankton, lighting up like fairy dust whenever the paddle dips in. You feel both lost and anchored. You've memorized maybe 2 E-TAC intervals. The navigator probably has 37. As the night deepens, the waves shift again. This isn't random. Waves aren't just bumpy water, they're language. And if you've got the patience to learn their dialect, they'll tell you exactly where you are. Polynesian navigators trained themselves to feel changes in swell patterns through their knees and elbows. Some even lay flat on the deck to absorb subtler vibrations. Right now you're feeling something odd. A cross swell, a longer pulse beneath the regular chop. You ask about it. That's the ghost of the trade wind, someone says. You blink. It's a poetic way to say you've entered the edge of a prevailing current zone. These underwater highways stretched for thousands of miles. Knowing how they moved and how they changed seasonally was key to plotting return voyages. You think back to the original trip, the clouds, the birds, the reef passage, and slowly it starts to click. This isn't a backward journey. It's a new one. A flipped mirror image of what you did before, and it requires its own logic. Eventually, your home island comes into view, a smear of familiar green under morning light. The navigator doesn't smile, but he gives a small nod, and the canoe gently angles inward. You're exhausted, not from paddling, but from absorbing. Your brain has been chewing on celestial geometry, aquatic scent trails, bird behavior, and wind choreography, and somehow it all worked. You dock. The crew jumps ashore casual as ever, but someone slips a flower behind your ear, grinning, a quiet way of saying you made it. You're not a navigator yet, but you listened. And in this world, that's the first step. You wake up sore. Your knees are bruised from the hours spent cross-legged in a canoe. Your shoulders ache in places you didn't know had muscles. And yet, the strange thing is, you're already thinking about doing it again. Because now you're hooked. What started as a curiosity about how Polynesians navigated has turned into an obsession. You want to know how they kept all of this in their heads. How someone could stare at stars, sniff salt air, or feel the curve of a wave and say, "Ah, yes, we're roughly 7 to 40 kilometers southeast of Savai'i, give or take a coconut." And so begins your crash course in wayfinding memory. Your navigator mentor, still not much of a talker, sits you down with a bowl of fermented breadfruit. He taps his knuckles on the side of his head and says, "You have to build the map in here, not out there." He's not being metaphorical. Polynesian navigation relies on a deeply internalized mental map. Not one made of paper and pins, but a living structure composed of sensory cues, oral stories, chants, and deeply layered associations. You're not memorizing data, you're embedding meaning into experience. One method you learn is star paths, linear sequences of stars that rise or set in alignment with your destination. Let's say you're sailing from Tahiti to the Marquesas. A particular star, say Sirius, will rise just off your left shoulder as you set out. Later, another star, Rigel, will hover above your bow when you're halfway. These markers are fixed in your mental horizon like lighthouses burned into the sky. But here's the twist: the stars move. Well, appear to move depending on the season. So you don't just memorize one star path, you memorize multiple rotating paths that correspond to different times of year. It's like having Google Maps, but only if you manually switch between summer and winter mode and remember which route skips the sea monster. You learn star names not in Western astronomical terms, but as metaphors. Some stars are birds, others fish. A few are even ancestral figures dancing across the sky. This mythological overlay helps with recall. Your brain may forget Canopus, but it'll remember the old fisherman who stirs the southern waters. And let's talk Itak again. You remember that, right? The imaginary islands you track your movement by. Here's where it gets wild. ETAC isn't just about navigation, it's about rhythm. Every time you pass an ETAC, even if it's a phantom island, it marks a kind of mental drumbeat. It keeps your focus sharp and your pace consistent. Some navigators use specific chants, long hypnotic verses tied to direction and distance. These were part mnemonic device, part prayer, part musical metronome. And yes, you try one. You get about 3 lines in before realizing you've accidentally invoked a Tongan lullaby about sea cucumbers. Still, your effort is appreciated. Back on the canoe, your mentor begins a quiz. He points north. What's the wave saying? You squint. Hello. Wrong. Apparently the wave is telling you that there's a low-pressure system forming 3 days west. He sighs and points upward. Which bird did we see at dawn? You say white one. He says white tern and explains how their absence at sunrise means their feeding grounds shifted, probably due to cooler offshore currents. Historians still argue whether bird behavior was ever formalized into strict navigation rules or if it was more interpretive. But everyone agrees birds were signals. White terns, Noddy's frigates, they each told a story. And this is how the knowledge stays alive. It isn't taught like a textbook. It's transmitted through repetition, analogy, story, and patience. You start realizing that your mentor doesn't give you direct answers because that's not the point. The point is to observe until the answer becomes obvious. At night, you sleep on a woven mat staring at the stars. You're starting to recognize them not by their Western names, but by feeling. That cluster, it makes you think of home, that bright one near the horizon. That's the one you saw when you first arrived. The sky is slowly turning into your map. And then comes the memory test. You're woken before dawn and given a carved stick with 10 notches. Your mentor tells you each notch represents a directional change. On a voyage, he once took an 800-mile journey between islands in the Tuamotus. Your task: reconstruct the entire route from memory based on the chants, the bird sightings, the current patterns, and the star positions you've been learning. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded and emotionally dehydrated. You guess the first few correctly, then you stumble. At one point, you accidentally send the canoe into a whirlpool of lava dolphins, a fictional hazard you may or may not have invented mid-answer. But your mentor doesn't laugh, he nods, because even your mistakes are part of the learning. You're building neural trails through the jungle of knowledge, and every misstep helps clear the path. By the end of the session, you're sweaty, exhausted, and weirdly proud. You didn't ace it, but you remembered enough to earn a wordless pat on the back. And from this culture, that's a standing ovation. You're still nowhere near ready to captain your own canoe. But your mind is changing. You no longer think of the sea as a blank space. It's a textured, living thing shifting under the weight of weatherbird flight memory and myth. And here's the best part. You don't need a compass, because the compass is in your mind. And somehow you're starting to believe that's enough. The canoe is quiet again, just the creak of wood, the slosh of water licking the hull, and the occasional caw of a frigate bird circling overhead. You're sitting cross-legged, balancing a split coconut in your lap, trying not to look too seasick while your mentor chews on a stalk of sugar cane like it's the most relaxing thing in the world. Today's lesson: clouds. Yes, clouds. Those fluffy, forgettable things you probably haven't thought about since someone pointed out a giraffe-shaped one when you were 8. But here in the middle of the ocean, clouds are not background scenery. They're vital clues. Drift too long without reading them, and you'll drift into oblivion. Your mentor raises his sugar cane in a vague gesture at the sky. Clouds tell you where the land is, he murmurs, as if this should be obvious. And with a bit of squinting, you start to see it too. There's a particular kind of cumulus, low, thick-bottomed, domed, like a fluffy pancake that tends to hover over islands, especially atolls. These island clouds form because the land underneath heats the air, creating a subtle uplift. That uplift in turn makes clouds form and sit there like smoke over an invisible fire. So when you spot one of these puffy domes far off on the horizon, it might not be wishful thinking. It might be land. Real land. Of course not every cloud is so helpful. Some are just clouds. Others mean wind shifts, changing humidity, or sneaky squalls about to ruin your nap. Over time, you start reading them like slow-motion hieroglyphs. Long, feathered cirrus clouds. Wind is coming from the west. A stack of flat-bottomed cumulus building fast rain in the afternoon, probably warm and brief. One of the trickiest things to decode is cloud color. Not just white or gray, but subtle tinges of yellow, green, and even pink. Your mentor claims he can smell the kind of rain coming just by looking at a certain orange-gray patch of sky. You try sniffing the air and nearly choke on coconut milk. Baby steps. And then there's the glow. Have you ever heard of land glow? Most people haven't. But for the seasoned wayfinder, it's an open secret. In pre-dawn hours, or just after sunset, the undersides of clouds near land sometimes pick up a faint, warm glow reflected off sandy beaches or shallow lagoons. Not bright, not obvious. Just a gentle illumination like someone left a candle under the sky. Historians still argue whether this was a dependable tool or more of a poetic superstition. But your mentor swears by it. He claims it's how his grandfather once spotted an island during a full blackout. No stars, no birds, just the whisper of cloud glow over the eastern horizon. You try to spot it yourself one evening. You lie on the deck, head on your arms, watching the clouds like a giant, slow game of charades. Was that a shimmer? Or just your eyelids getting heavy? Too late, you're asleep. When you wake, your mentor is already up boiling seaweed tea over a small stone stove. He smirks and says, "The clouds waited for you." You're not sure if that's a compliment or a joke. Possibly both. Clouds are more than visual cues, they're timekeepers. In a world without clocks, clouds tell you how long until dusk, when the wind will change, and how far away you are from your destination. Certain shapes like anvils or cloud towers often form during consistent times of day. Over time, your body syncs with them. You feel it in your bones when the high clouds stretch out like pulled wool. Something's shifting, and so your day becomes a rhythm of scanning, noting, filing things away in that growing mental cabinet behind your eyes. Cloud height, moderate. Direction of drift, northwest. Shadow color, slightly greenish, possibly indicating algae-rich lagoon water nearby. It's exhausting. It's exhilarating. It's a little like becoming a wizard of the sky. But perhaps the most humbling part of cloud watching is how often you're wrong. You once thought a towering cumulus meant land was just beyond. Turned out it was just a thunderhead laughing at your optimism. You'd even packed your landing snack. Your mentor doesn't scold. He just tells a story something about a young navigator who followed a rainbow to a new island, only to find a drifting whale carcass. The moral is unclear, but the imagery sticks with you. Then one dawn it happens. You see a cluster of clouds low on the horizon. They're thick-bottomed, almost motionless. There's a shimmer underneath, barely perceptible. And in the pit of your stomach, something clicks. Land, you whisper. Your mentor doesn't answer. He just hands you the paddle. You take it and paddle toward the clouds. It's your third hour of paddling and your arms feel like wet noodles. The clouds you were chasing haven't moved much, still lingering in their quiet dome, but neither has your confidence. You glance at your mentor who lounges like a cat in the sun, chewing something green and bitter-looking. He hasn't said a word. You're starting to wonder if he's just letting you paddle toward disappointment for the sake of the lesson. But then you hear it. A single chirp. Then another. Sharp, brief sounds that seem impossibly loud against the slosh and creak of your canoe. You freeze. Your mentor raises an eyebrow. He heard it too. Birds. You crane your neck, searching the sky. At first, there's nothing but that endless blue rimmed with cloud fringe. And then, like a magician's trick, they appear a small group of seabirds flying low and fast in a wide arc. Now the real lesson begins. In Polynesian navigation, birds are more than animals. They are compass needles with feathers. The key is understanding their patterns. Not all birds are helpful. Frigate birds, for instance, can stay aloft for weeks and sleep while gliding. They might be anywhere and going nowhere. But others are routine as tax collectors. Noddies, terns, and boobies are especially important. These birds forage at sea but return to land every night. Their range is limited, usually no more than 40 kilometers from shore. So when you see them flying with purpose near dusk, you know they're heading home. Follow them and you'll find it. The tricky part, knowing when they're going home versus when they're just out for breakfast. Your mentor gestures to the flock. Too high, he murmurs, still feeding. You squint. It's true they're not flying in straight lines but circling, dipping into the water occasionally. Snack time. But later in the afternoon, you spot another small group, low, steady, heading in one unwavering direction. That's the telltale sign. Time to follow the birds. Historians still argue whether Polynesian wayfinders truly tracked birds in open sea crossings or mainly near archipelagos. Some scholars suggest the bird method was more symbolic than functional good for finding nearby atolls, less so for charting 2,000-kilometer voyages. Others insist that sharp-eyed navigators trained from childhood could detect these feathered guides even on multi-day crossings, reading them alongside swell and starlight like part of one celestial script. For now, all you care about is not losing sight of them. You paddle, watch. The birds dip out of view. You stand balancing dangerously to get a better look. Your canoe rocks. You sit down fast. Your mentor chuckles quietly, not helping. A few hours pass. The clouds still loom like sentries. The birds have vanished again, but now your ears pick up a different sound, the rhythmic beat of wings closer this time. You glance up to see a booby, a large one with black-tipped wings gliding steadily overhead. No swooping, no meandering, just pure vector. He's going home, your mentor says simply, so you follow. Navigation by bird is not foolproof, of course. Birds can lead you astray. One time, a young navigator followed a bird that landed not on land, but a floating log teeming with crabs. Another story tells of a bird whose home turned out to be a shipwreck island, occupied by very aggressive seals. Nature has a sense of humor, but today fortune is kind. By twilight, the clouds ahead take on that pink-orange hue of reflected land. You lean forward, heart thumping not from exertion now, but from possibility. And there it is, just barely. A speck, a sliver of green against the darkening sea, an island. You found it. Well, the birds helped. The clouds vouched for it. Your mentor might have known all along, but still, you're the one holding the paddle. You coast slowly toward the shore, catching the scent of land earthy, sweet, alive. Flowers, trees, maybe smoke from a cooking fire. You can't quite tell, but it smells like something real. You don't land yet, it's too dark. Instead, you drop anchor offshore, let the canoe rock gently in the tide, and watch as more birds arrive circling once before gliding silently into the foliage. Sleep doesn't come easily, not because you're uncomfortable, but because your brain is buzzing with the day's information. Cloud patterns, wing beats, flight arcs, reflections. You feel like you've been enrolled in a school with no desks, no books, just feathers and vapor. But eventually you do sleep. The water lulls you, the birds settle, and for once the clouds above are just clouds. You awake before dawn, the first light a soft lavender glow brushing the sky. The island ahead is still a shadowy silhouette, but the sound of waves and birdsong fills your ears. Your mentor is already awake, polishing the canoe's hull with a strip of rough cloth. He says nothing but nods toward the trees where a faint plume of smoke curls upward, proof someone else calls this place home. Today you'll learn about navigating not just by clouds or birds, but by stars, the ancient lighthouse in the Polynesian night sky. You sit quietly watching as the sky slowly brightens and the stars fade like a slow closing of an eyelid. The sun rises, casting long shadows across the sand, and you can't help but feel a little thrill the ocean has secrets, and now so do you. Your mentor pulls out a small wooden chart carved with symbols. It looks more like art than a map, dots, lines, and curves, all etched with painstaking care. This is a stick chart, a Polynesian invention that captures the patterns of waves, islands, and currents. Each bent piece of cane represents a swell, each knot a reef or an island. You trace the lines with your finger, imagining the ocean as a living tapestry with its own language. Now comes the tricky part. The stars you learned about as a child in school, their names and positions here, they are more than just distant lights. They are the framework for navigation, a celestial map that changes with the seasons and your position on the globe. Your mentor points to a cluster of stars low on the horizon. That's Hokulea. He whispers the great star, guiding canoes across thousands of miles. Polynesian navigators memorize hundreds of stars and their rising and setting points, using them like clock hands to tell direction and time. The key is in knowing which star appears where and when as the Earth turns beneath you. It's a moving puzzle. If you lose track, the ocean swallows you whole. A fringe fact. The Polynesians sometimes used star paths, imagined lines drawn between stars connecting points in the sky that mirrored the route on the ocean below. It's a bit like connect the dots, but the dots are suns burning millions of miles away. The wayfinders would practice this knowledge by lying back on decks tracing invisible lines with their fingers dreaming of distant islands. Historians still debate how far these techniques were pushed before European contact. Some believe Polynesians crossed the Pacific multiple times with incredible precision. Others suggest that luck and chance played a bigger role with navigation, sometimes more hopeful than scientific. What is clear, though, is the sheer skill and confidence required, an art passed down for generations by heart and eye alone. You try to commit it all to memory, the star clusters and their paths, feeling the weight and wonder of the cosmos above. The day stretches ahead warm and fragrant, promising more lessons on the living ocean and its celestial companions. The midday sun hangs heavy above you now, baking the deck of the canoe and casting shimmering reflections on the water. You've been practicing reading the waves, but today your mentor introduces a new player in this vast ocean drama, the seabirds. Their flight patterns, calls, and habits are like an ancient GPS pointing toward land or danger. Out on the open sea, it's easy to feel utterly lost like a leaf floating on an endless blue pond. But the Polynesians had a keen eye for bird behavior. Certain species like the white tern or the tropic bird never stray far from shore. Spotting them is like catching a secret message land is near. Your mentor points to a circling bird far above. That one travels out every morning, but by afternoon it returns home. Follow its path, and you find your way. You watch as the bird dips and rises, a graceful dance that suggests stories you've yet to learn. Your mentor tells you how the navigators recognize the flight ranges of dozens of birds, timing their journeys by day and season. This ornithological map was crucial, especially when clouds hid the stars or the sun vanished behind thick mist. Here's a quirky tidbit: some navigators even trained young birds to return to their home islands from other locations, using them as living compass needles. The idea of using wild animals as natural GPS devices might sound like something from a fantasy, but it's a testament to the Polynesians' intimate bond with nature. You almost imagine the birds whispering secrets just beyond human hearing. The conversation shifts to the birds' calls, which sometimes served as auditory cues. The subtle differences in chirps or cries could signal proximity to reefs or the approach of storms. Learning these sounds was akin to mastering a secret language, a whisper from the wild ocean itself. Historians still argue whether the Polynesians' knowledge of birds was purely observational, or if it included spiritual or symbolic meanings, connecting the natural world to the divine in ways Western science struggles to interpret. What you know, though, is that this relationship was more than practical. It was deeply poetic, blending survival with a profound respect for life's rhythms. You feel the sun warming your skin, the bird's wings casting fleeting shadows on the deck. It's a reminder the ocean's vastness is softened by these small winged guides who carry you home without a word. The afternoon sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in soft hues of apricot and lavender. You lean against the mast, your senses attuned to the subtle signs the sea offers. Now, your mentor turns your attention to the clouds, those drifting canvases that carry secrets just as vital as the stars or birds. You learn that not all clouds are created equal. Some gather over land heavy with moisture and promise of rain, while others hang low and flat over the ocean shaped by winds and currents. The Polynesians called these cloud formations their celestial road signs. By memorizing their shapes and positions, you could tell which way the islands lay hidden beyond the horizon. Your mentor gestures toward a towering cloud far away, its base flat and glowing golden by the sun. That's a sign of land, he says quietly. The cloud builds where warm air rises from the island's peaks. You watch the cloud pulse gently like a breathing monument in the sky. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some navigators believed certain cloud shapes were messages from their ancestors guiding them home through more than just weather. This blend of practical knowledge and spiritual belief weaves throughout Polynesian navigation, creating a rich tapestry of meaning beyond what meets the eye. You start to understand why cloud reading was more than simple observation. It was a kind of meditation requiring patience and quiet attentiveness. like listening to a lullaby sung by the sky itself. And just like stars, clouds move predictably, with the day's rhythms knowing their patterns is like holding a map in your mind's eye. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators' cloud lore was purely empirical or if it involved ritualized storytelling and symbolic frameworks that linked them to the cosmos. Either way, the clouds guided voyages just as surely as any compass or star. The sky deepens into twilight, the clouds blushing softly as if whispering promises of islands waiting just beyond sight. You feel a calm settle over you, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you're not lost, just temporarily adrift on a sea of stories. Night falls gently, wrapping the sea in a velvet cloak, speckled with stars. You're no longer just a passenger, you're beginning to sense the rhythm of this vast oceanic world. But it's not only the stars and clouds that guide you now. Your mentor points upward again, but this time to the feathered navigators soaring silently above. Birds are the ocean's secret messengers, and Polynesian navigators knew them intimately. You watch a white tern glide across the night sky, wings outstretched like a delicate brushstroke. Your mentor explains that certain bird species never stray far from land, so spotting them at sea means you're close, sometimes just a few miles away. You learn that observing birds involves more than sight. Their calls, flight patterns, and even the time of day they appear create a symphony of clues. For instance, the frigate bird, with its long wings and forked tail, can fly hundreds of miles over open water, but never lands at sea. It must return to land to rest. Seeing one circling low signals an island nearby. Here's a quirky tidbit: some navigators even memorized bird songs to help identify them from a distance using the soundscape like an ancient GPS. Imagine drifting on the waves, lulled by a chorus of seabirds guiding you home. Historians still argue whether Polynesian bird knowledge was passed down through strict oral traditions, coded songs, or practical apprenticeship, and how much of it was augmented by myth and ritual. Regardless, this bond with birds is undeniable, a partnership between human and nature built over centuries. As you listen to the soft calls blending with the ocean's hum, you realize these creatures are more than mere animals. They're living compasses, feathers pointing the way across the endless blue. You close your eyes, briefly feeling the ocean's pulse beneath you, the sky's secrets above, and the feathered guides circling just beyond your reach. It's a quiet reassurance: even alone you are never truly lost. The dawn creeps up slowly, softening the horizon with gentle hues of pink and gold. You wake on the deck of the canoe, wrapped in a light breeze that carries the scent of salt and distant palms. Today, your lessons shift to another vital skill: reading the clouds. Clouds may seem like fleeting shapes in the sky, but to Polynesian navigators, they're solid signposts. Your mentor points to a low bank of clouds resting like a fluffy carpet over a stretch of ocean. See those, he says. They gather over islands where the warm land heats the moist air, causing clouds to form right above the shore. You learn to distinguish between cloud types: thin wisps that drift too high to matter thick masses, signaling land, and peculiar island clouds that cluster like sentinels. You study how these clouds hover persistently in otherwise clear skies, refusing to budge. There's a fringe idea that certain cloud shapes mimic the outlines of islands below, like nature's own map in the sky, though historians still debate if this was intentional observation or a poetic interpretation by early sailors. Either way, it's clear the clouds guided many journeys. Quirkier still is the belief that some clouds carry the spirits of ancestors watching over travelers and offering protection. You can't help but feel a comforting weight in the air as you imagine those silent guardians riding the breeze alongside you. Your mentor teaches you how to watch the movement and color of clouds, to predict weather, a skill essential for avoiding storms and timing voyages. Pale, bright clouds mean steady skies. Dark, rolling clouds hint at rain or wind. You realize that cloud watching is as much about patience and mindfulness as it is about survival. With each breath of sea air, your eyes become sharper, your mind slower and calmer, absorbing these celestial hints like a sponge. You begin to trust the sky's quiet stories woven in every drifting puff and shifting shadow. It's not just about finding land anymore, it's about connecting with the sky itself, reading its subtle signs and learning to move in harmony with the invisible rhythms that guide the great ocean. The sea is calm, a glassy expanse reflecting the high sun, and you settle into the rhythm of the waves, as your mentor introduces you to another vital companion, the birds. Not just any birds, but the island-hopping species whose habits are key to navigation. You watch as a frigate bird soars overhead, wings outstretched, its silhouette bold against the blue. Frigates fly far out, but they return to land at night, your mentor explains. If you see them heading in a direction, you're likely near land. You start to understand that observing the flight path, the calls, and the timing of different birds becomes a living map in the sky. There's a fascinating lesser-known fact here. Some birds can detect islands from dozens of miles away, possibly by scent or by subtle changes in the wind. This makes them perfect natural guides. And here's a quirky tidbit. The Polynesians even used the calls of seabirds as a way to estimate their distance from shore, interpreting their cries like Morse code on the wind. Historians still argue whether early Polynesian navigators trained themselves to understand bird behavior systematically, or if this knowledge was passed down through generations as a blend of empirical observation and cultural lore. The truth is probably a bit of both. You notice a small flock of noddies fluttering low above the waves. Your mentor explains they rarely stray far from land and will sometimes fly directly out to sea in the morning, only to return by evening. Tracking their movements, you learn, was as vital as charting stars. As you listen to the soft calls mixing with the ocean's whisper, you realize that birdwatching here isn't just a pastime. It's an active, life-saving skill. Each flap, each cry, each loop in the air is a clue, a thread in the tapestry of navigation. With the sun warming your back, you imagine how your ancestors must have felt. Eyes trained on the horizon and sky relying on the smallest wing beats to chart a course across the vast Pacific. Their lives balanced delicately between wind wave and feather. The afternoon wanes, and the sea begins to sparkle with hints of amber and gold as you and your mentor turn your attention to another subtle but powerful navigator, the clouds. At first glance, clouds might seem like fleeting fluff, but in Polynesian voyaging, they are silent guides etched across the sky. Your mentor points to a peculiar low-hanging bank of clouds resting just above the horizon. See those? They're called island clouds, he says softly. They form where the warm air meets the cooler ocean around islands, creating a telltale sign far before you can see land. You watch as the cloud shapes shift gently, their undersides tinged with the softest pearly light. Here's a neat detail. You might not expect some clouds carry specific colors or shapes, depending on the type of land beneath them, like coral reefs or dense forests, acting as a celestial map with textures and hues. It's like nature's own stained glass window, and you're learning how to read it. Historians still debate how systematically Polynesian navigators interpreted these cloud formations. Was it a strict science or poetic intuition refined over generations? The answer likely weaves together observation and cultural memory, much like the stars and birds you've studied. As the light fades, your mentor teaches you about the wind clouds, wispy streaks that hint at shifting air currents, helping to predict weather changes essential when you're days from the nearest shore. You feel the quiet tension between hope and caution in the way these clouds stretch and dissipate. You think of the countless voyages where survival depended not on compasses or GPS, but on reading these soft signs, knowing when to press forward and when to wait. The clouds become not just weather, but stories, whispers from the earth and sky guiding you home. The sky darkens slowly, and with it the knowledge you've gathered settles warmly around you like a protective cloak, woven from wind, wave, wing, and cloud. Night deepens, and the sky above you stretches wide and clear, a vast dome glittering with countless stars. Your journey comes full circle as you settle under this celestial canopy, ready to absorb the final lessons of the night. The stars, those brilliant pinpricks of light, have guided Polynesian navigators for centuries, and now with all you've learned about birds, clouds, and ocean signs, you understand their silent power. Your mentor traces a gentle arc in the sky, naming constellations, unfamiliar yet strangely comforting, some shaped like fishhooks, others like turtles or spears, each a marker, a wayfinder across the empty blue. These aren't just pretty patterns, they are a language, a map written in a light. You probably didn't know this, but Polynesian navigators also use the star compass, an imagined circle divided into sectors aligned with rising and setting stars, allowing precise direction even when the horizon blurred in mist or rain. It's a clever mental tool, blending observation and memory. Historians still argue whether this star compass was a formal teaching method or a flexible tradition passed down through storytelling and hands-on practice, but either way, it's undeniably effective. You feel a soothing rhythm in the night, the gentle sway of the canoe, the low murmur of waves, the distant call of night birds, nature's lullaby. You recall the earlier lessons about birds guiding voyagers to land and how clouds reveal hidden shores. Now the stars complete this tapestry, offering both direction and comfort. As you listen to your mentor's quiet voice and gaze upward, you realize this isn't just about navigation. It's about trust in nature and your senses, and in the wisdom of those who came before. It's a slow, deliberate dance between human and environment, a partnership written across sky, sea, and time. Now, with the stars as your final guide, you drift off the vast Pacific, wrapped gently around you like a soft blanket, carrying the legacy of ancient voyagers safely into your dreams. Word count 1073. You breathe out slowly, feeling your body relax deeper with each breath. The lessons of cloud birdwave and star blur softly in your mind like gentle waves washing over sun-warmed sand. Imagine the warm night air, the salt-sweet breeze, the hushed rustling of palm fronds as your thoughts slow, and the peaceful vastness of the ocean folds you into rest. Your eyelids grow heavier, the rhythm of nature's guidance soothing every muscle. There is no hurry here, no urgency, just the eternal calm of the sea and sky meeting on the horizon. Let yourself float on this quiet current, safe and steady as you surrender to the night. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with starlit voyages and cloud-whispered secrets.